Hello everyone and welcome back to Azam Sharp YouTube channel. And in the last lecture we talked about that not all tests are good, right? I mean, we talked about that how this test that we're writing, test budget create, it doesn't really test anything. It's basically testing Swift data framework, right? So we don't really have to do that. We should be testing our domain logic or our business rules. So what test can be a much better test, a little bit better test? Well, one of the requirements for our application is that whenever you try to create duplicate budgets, like two budgets with the same name, like groceries, then it should throw an exception. So this is a kind of test that you can actually write because it is testing the business logic of your application. So let's go ahead and write this test. Now, what will be the name of the test? Well, it should begin with test, and then we can say throw duplicate name exception when saving budget with same name. All right, there we go. I mean, you can use any other name that you want, which is much clearer to you. I think this is much clearer to me. I'm going to go ahead and also mark this with main actor so that I can access the context. And let's go ahead and create the model container. There we go. And we're going to go ahead and create a budget. There's our budget. So now the question is, well, how can we make sure that when we add a new budget or a different budget with the same name, which is groceries, then it will throw an exception? When we look at this context.insert, this doesn't really throw an exception, because if it was throwing an exception, then I would have to use try or something, but it's not. So definitely we cannot really use this particular feature or this way of sending errors. Now, there is another thing that you can do, context.save, and that does throw an exception, but that will be kind of like an internal exception. So it won't really be related to your custom exception for duplicate name. So we have to do something a little bit different over here. Instead of using context.insert, what we can do is we can build something like budget.save and then pass in the context to the budget. Now, obviously, there is no such thing as budget.save. So this means that we need to create that. So I'll go back to my budget model. And this is where you can actually write your business logic. So I can go ahead and say function save, context, model context, throws. And in this save function, we can go ahead and check that if our budget already exists or not. So we can say over here, check if budget with the same name already exists. If so, then throw an exception. Else, well, if it's not there, then else save the budget. So that's what we're trying to do. So now the question is, well, how do we know, how do we find out if the budget with the same name already exists? So this is where we will have to create a private function. Budget exists. There we go. We're going to send in the name for that budget, and we're going to send in the context, which will be the model context, and it's going to return Boolean. Now, how do we fetch the name? How do we get a budget with a name? We have to create a fetch descriptor. And then we can go ahead and execute that particular fetch using the context that is already passed to you. And we can also check over here if the budget is not empty and budget count is 1. So now I can go ahead and check something over here. If the budget exists, passing in the name of the budget, which is simply the name, and the context, which is already passed to you. If it does exist, then throw budget error dot duplicate name. Now, there is no such thing as budget error.duplicate name. So we'll have to create that. And if it does not exist, then we can simply go ahead and say contacts.insert self. Self is the actual budget itself. Now let's go ahead and create the budget error. Now you can create budget error in the same file, but if you have a lot of custom errors, it will be a good idea to put it inside the errors folder or a group that you can create. But right now, we're just going to put it over here. Now let's go back to our test. Okay, so in our test, now we can say over here budget.save, and now the save is available. Good. And I can go ahead and pass in the context. There we go. So it's going to save. Now, one of the things to keep in mind over here is that the save function can throw an error. So we have to use try, and we will also update this to have throws. Next, we can create another budget. All right, so let's go ahead and create another budget. Another budget equals to, and we're going to create the budget with the same exact name, groceries. And whatever the limit is, that doesn't really matter in this case. And now we are actually expecting that the error is thrown. So assert throws error budget.save in the context. And now we can say that we're going to get the error back. Let's go ahead and get the thrown error back, which is error as budget error. And we can check that if this XCT assert not nil, so this is not nil, thrown error. And we will also check that the error is of special or specific type. So we'll say budget error dot duplicate name, and the thrown error is of that particular type. So now we are done with our implementing our test, and let's go ahead and run this test. Now, since we're running this for the first time, it might take a while to run, but this is a test that is testing for some business logic. All right, it's testing that you are able to, you are going to get an error if you try to save two different budgets. Actually, hold on a second. I think I made a mistake. Right over here, it should be another budget, right? So this should be another budget. There we go. Because that's what we're trying to save. We're trying to save another budget, not the budget itself. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it again. And again, this is going to take a while, so I'm going to get back to it when it's done. And there you go. We can see that our test is now passing, which basically means that when you try to insert two budgets with the same exact name, it is throwing an exception. So let's see what happens if I create a budget with a different name. So I'm going to put one of them as groceries and the other one as vacation. So if I run this, this test should fail because it will not throw an exception. And here we go. You can actually see that the exception was not thrown, did not throw an error. So it looks like our test is actually good. Again, I'm going to change this to groceries because that is what we are testing. So there you go. This is one of the tests that you can write, which is a much better test than the last time we wrote the test. This is a bad test because this was not really testing anything. It was mostly testing that if the Swift data framework is working as expected, and which we shouldn't be testing. That's the job of Apple, to test if their Swift data framework is working. All right. Now in the future videos, I will add some more tests to our budget application, but this is at least a little bit of a good start, and then we can learn from it and apply these principles of writing tests for the domain and the business logic in our next future test. If you like this video and want to support my channel, then the best way would be to check out my courses on my website. And I just published a brand new course. It's called SwiftUI Architecture, Patterns and Best Practices. Now this course is 3+ years of my research in SwiftUI architecture. So this is more of a discussion-based course where I'm introducing a lot of different things, a lot of things that I've learned, MVVM pattern, like how it doesn't really blend in correctly with SwiftUI, and what patterns you can use to create your scalable large applications. So this course goes into a lot of those details about understanding aggregate models, stored SwiftUI views, which are not really views, validation, navigation, and a huge section on testing, as you can see, which explains mocking as well as writing tests for the presentation logic, the domain logic, and much more. So you can get the course for $149, or you can subscribe and become a member and you get access to all the courses. So thank you so much, and I really hope you enjoy this course. Check out the link in the YouTube description.